Okay, now that we're set up and we've got our reference images and we've got our units explained and set up, let's get to work. So now we want to get a surface for this setup. I could do this with curves, but I'd like to exhibit this with surfaces so that you know how this works. Basically what I'm going to do is build up 4 different surfaces, and then I'm going to select isoparms on the perimeter of those surfaces, and I'm going to build a new surface from it, which is what I'm going to then convert to polygons and build up the stairwell from there. I've already created an example of this scene, and I'll show you an idea of what the final product is. So here's a picture of what the final product might look like. I've already gone through this once so that I could get a good feel of how to do it and what I need to do for you. And I identified a number of different things that I'm going to do right the second time around. But this is more or less it. And with the handrail, the wires, the steps, you can see there's a couple of errors I've done, and I've applied some basic shaders to it so that I could separate the colors and the specular highlights between the different materials. So let's get 2 NURBS surfaces. I'll open up the outliner here, so we'll use the outliner preset. And I want 2 NURBS surfaces. So the first one, we're going to have real basic changes here to the input. So the radius of the first one is going to be 12 units. So that's going to be the outer radius of our step. The end sweep is going to be 30 degrees because we know that the step is a full sweep of 30. The sections is going to be half of the total amount. So we've got a total divisions of 12 on our if we look at the pie from the top view, we have 12 divisions. So I'm going to make half of that because I'm going to need the other half on the inside, and we'll clarify that soon enough. The number of spans can stay the same, and the height ratio, I need this to be 1/12 of its total height. So that's going to be, I did a little quick math on the calculator, so that's 0.0833, and that's basically 1 unit tall right there. So the cylinder on the inside, oh, and one more thing. I want this piece to be aligned to the world axis. So from the top view, I want this piece to be straight on the x-axis. So I'm going to rotate it on the y-axis 15 degrees. So half of its sweep. For the inside cylinder, for this one, we're going to do a couple of changes. Its radius is going to stay the same. Its end sweep is going to be the same. Its sections will be 12. And its height ratio will be 1. So a radius of 1 and a height ratio of 1 makes an object 1 unit tall. So we look at this from the side view, from the front view, excuse me, we can see that both of them are the same height. Near exactly. So from here, I want to select 2 isoparms on the inside cylinder to cut it in half. And to do that, I'm going to marquee over the first one and then shift marquee over the second one. So I'm cutting on the x-axis. We're cutting it in half, like as if we're going to do some kind of symmetry modeling. I'm going to switch the menu set to surfaces, and underneath the surfaces, and then underneath the Edit NURBS menu, we're going to detach the surface. I'm going to hide the inside hemisphere, Control H. And now what I'm going to do is loft between an isoparm on this object, so I'm going to select this outer isoparm, and then the isoparm on the next object, so I'm going to hold down Shift and add the second isoparm. So this is highlighted in yellow, and this one's highlighted in yellow. And now I can go to the Surfaces menu and choose Loft. And in here I want to do a section span of 12. No particular reason for 12, just to give me enough divisions to get a high quality look. Same thing on the other side. So I want to keep the parallel isoparms to have the same number of divisions. So I've got 6 divisions on this surface, 6 divisions across the back surface, 12 on these 2 parallel surfaces. So now what I'm going to do is patch or boundary create a surface on this boundary. So I'm going to go to isoparm and select that one, isoparm on this one, and shift select that one, isoparm, shift select that one, and finally that one. And then I'm going to go to the Surfaces menu and choose Boundary. And that's going to make this beautiful surface, which is going to be relatively easy to convert to polygons. So there's going to be a little bit of trouble with the polygon version of this right in this corner right here. And there's this little tiny overlap. You see it right there? So I'm going to have to clean that up in polygons. I could take the time to do it now, but it's simple enough to clean it up in polygons. So we'll start this off with a conversion on this object so that we can start to see how this is all going to come together. So modify, convert, NURBS of polygons, option box. For this one, I do want to control the division count. So I'm going to use general, and I'm going to make sure it's set to per surface number of isoparms or isoparameters for both U and V, and I'm going to set this to 10 by 10. And I'm going to close that. And of course I can change those numbers in the channel box if I need to. So let's just move this out of the way and see what we have. So at first glance you can see that we have this little vertex right here making that 4-point polygon, which kind of makes that corner a little odd. That in the long run will produce some problems after the extrusions and after bevels. It'll cause more problems during the beveling process. We'll see that soon. Just something to be aware of. It's quite compressed in that area. So we know every step is at 30 degrees. So let's experiment a little bit and move forward to sort of test that out. So let's take this surface, this polygon surface that we've created, and we'll group it twice using the same strategy I've talked about before. And we'll go up to the Edit, Duplicate Special option box. Let's reset what's in here if there is any changes in there. So we want an instance, and we want a new group for better management of the materials. We want to have a riser of anywhere between 2.1 and 2.3. So we're going to use we're actually going to use something a little bit easier to manage. I'm actually going to use 2.5 because it's easier math. The rotation, we're going to set it to 30 degrees, and we know we have 12 steps. So we have one step, so I only need 11 more. And so when we hit apply, it seems to look pretty good. And if we experiment with just a little bit here, like if we go to back to the polygon menu and extrude it, let's just do that, extrude it, and we give it a little bit of thickness on the local translate Z, so let's try 0.5. Notice that right here these align very well, and there's a nice overlap happening in the back, but I don't have an overlap with the step here at the end. That's because I'm actually over rotated. So each step may indeed be 30 degrees, but I should have a slight overlap so that when I bring in a pipe to support the handrail, and let's make this a radius of say 0.2 for example, and when I snap that to that point and maybe increase the height a little bit, notice that it's only right there on the corner. So what I really wanted to do is like punch a hole right here and have it traveling and hitting right here on the corner, not on the edge of it. So I needed to pull back the rotation a bit. But I still need a full 360 degree rotation. So what do? Well, that's where that second floor comes in handy. If you remember the image reference back here, this one. There's that 13th step. The 13th step is the second floor. So if we actually use 13 steps and then do a quick calculation, like figure out, out of 360 degrees, we divide that by 13 steps, what do we get? We're going to get about 27.69 degrees. And after some experimentation, I can tell you that that's still not quite enough. I found that about 26.8 is enough. And you can actually find some spiraling staircase plans floating around on Google searches that actually use a 26.8 degree rotation for a 12-step stairwell. I didn't quite understand why at first, but it makes sense to me now. So what I'm going to do is trash these pieces. I'll keep the cylinder. And let's try a value of 26.8 and 12 steps for a total of 13 because I've already got one, and hit apply. So now when we take a look at this cylinder and let's say we move it in place like right here, Notice that that clips so very, very well. So all I need now are some divisions right in this area for me to connect this pipe. And because they're instance, they'll cast across all the other pieces, and then I'm going to have a great connection for that rod. So that works out very, very, very nicely. And I've got my 13th step, which is going to act like the second floor. Alright, so let's work on getting that hole cut into the step for the handrail pipes. First off, I want to remove the poly extrusion that I've done to this step, and that was a while ago, so I don't really have the ability to undo it with the Z button. So instead, I'm going to go to Hypergraph Connections for this object, and what I'm looking for is the very last thing that happened to this, because I know poly extrude is the very last input, that being the one on top. So this is the one I want, so I'm going to select it in the Hypergraph Connections and hit the delete key on my keyboard, and that will wipe it out. So that's an effective way of clearing out a chunk of history, completely removing it without having to undo a whole bunch of work. So from here, I want to divide up this polygon, that one right there. I want that one to be cut up a bit so that when I extrude it, I have enough divisions to connect to the 8-sided cylinder. My gut reaction is to split with the Insert Edge Loop tool. Oh, and to split at 50%. So I'm going to use multiple edge loops with a division of 1 so that it cuts at exactly 50%. So I'm going to cut there and a cut across here, and I'll repeat the same thing on the other side to keep it symmetrical. Now, that's all well and good, but it does cause a problem on the back end because it adds all this extra detail here in the back end. So what I'm going to do instead, or in addition to it, is go through with the edge tool, and I'm going to select that one edge here all the way up to here, and I'm going to delete that edge loop using the delete edge vertex. That will produce an end gun right here, but it will save me from having a tremendous amount of problems over here when I do the beveling, which I have some foresight on because I've done this already. So let's just delete that edge vertex. Again, 2 little end gun splitting here, but they won't be a problem because it'll be on a flat surface. Next thing is I want to snap this object straight away to that corner, that cross that's been created there for me, that division. So I'm going to snap to points, snap right to it. You can see now it's aligned. Next thing is to take these polygons, those 4 right there, and to extrude them and offset them just a little bit. I don't want to clip into that cylinder, so I'm just going to offset them a little bit. I'm holding Control to get small numbers and delete them. Something like that. So I've got a hole on each step now. Next, I want to make sure the cylinder is flush with that step, so that I know it is exactly 5 units, because each step is moved up 2.5. So with it snapped right there, 5 unit is or half my cylinder is 2.5 units. I'm going to then snap the vertices of this hole to the cylinder, and take a moment to do that. So this is how I get it to be an exact match on that hole. I could have used a 6-sided cylinder, but an 8-sided cylinder easily and quickly matched this point count. Alright, and then when I move this rod upwards, so we'll move it up, say 3 units. 3 units for, meaning 2.5 plus the 0.5 height of this step, puts it flush on the first step and penetrates through the second, and then the actual height of the rail itself, that can be whatever I want it to be, and I'll just have to make a guess as to what that is. And it's simple enough to adjust the overall height of the handrail with a simple edit of those vertices. Okay, so let's re-thicken after all of that work. In object mode, edit mesh, extrude, and then this time we're going to do 0.5 in a local translate Z. I actually think it's going to be, yeah, so we want it to push downward. That did move downward, didn't it? Yeah, so 0.5 is the better number. And that's nice, so we don't have to flip normals, because a negative number on the local translate z means the normals would have flipped. So we've got a nice hole penetrating right there, and what I want to do now is work on rounding out those corners and beveling the edges of this step. I'm not going to use subdivision surfaces in this piece. I want to be clear on that. This is an architectural rendering, and my camera probably won't be any closer than, that. So beveled edges should be enough to get this job done right. We should do the rounded corners first. And that's a simple matter of selecting, just had to hit Q to drop out of that tool. So select that corner and the opposite corner. So just those two edges. What I want to do for this is quite straightforward, is a bevel. And I want it to, I'll just use the settings I have right here. I'll just hit apply. And that does split open the corner. And I want to split it open larger than that. So using my virtual slider, I'll just increase that. And then I want to increase the divisions to maybe 4 or 6. So 3, 4, 5, 6 looks decent. So that was easy. Next comes the slightly harder part, and that would be the beveling of the top and bottom corners. All the way around, lengthwise. So let's get those. Double clicking. And there are a couple of problems. Notice it stops right here on this corner. Let's investigate this, because again, I have some foresight in this because I've already done it. I think I know what the problem is. So if I just tap 3 to preview and subdivision surfaces, we're getting a 5-star here, but what really is going to happen that I'm almost certain of is that there's a split that occurs right here. So we're just going to have to deal with it when it happens. So let's get to that. So I'm going to double click and then shift double click to get that one. Shift double click to get that one. This is a broad n-gon here, so I'm going to have to single click these. Shift click. And then that one on the back end. And then the one right over here in the back. So that one. So let's confirm my selection. Make sure I don't have anything else. Very good. And run the bevel on that one. So again, the same settings that I've been using all along, 0.25 and 2. Let's make it a little wider of a bevel, so the offset, let's increase that. Okay, yeah. So you see right here how it's kind of ripped up a bit. If we go to vertex and just frame up those vertices, we can see there's like a little bit of an overlap and some splitting going on in here. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to translate that point back a bit. I'm going to do that from the top view. And we're just going to move it back here, and you can see how that straightens it out. And then this one, well, see, that's kind of a rogue point. And it's making this triangle right here. Instead of dealing with that, I'm simply going to merge it down. So I'm going to merge just like that. So I've got my quad again and quad. So that cleans up that problem. I should have another problem over here. Another triangle created. And I should be able to simply translate that to straighten it out. So that corner looks okay. And I probably have the same problems on the opposite end. Let's take a look. Nope. Nope. That looks clean. Let's take a look at the back end. There's probably a couple problems over there. Let's just select some vertices and hit F to frame that up. Yeah, so there's some stuff garbled up over here because of those points that were severely overlapped. So this is simple enough. Let's switch to, say, the front view. And again, just frame up that section in question. And let's just tag some vertices one at a time and just move them down. Straightening them up a little bit, leveling it out. That's a good start. And then let's say go back to perspective and just move these around a little bit. Let's hold control and drag them on the y-axis. They don't want to move. Okay, so we won't do that. So it's really tiny. I'm sure I could have been more precise somewhere along the line, but I do believe that because of how tiny this is, it really isn't much of an interference. So I'll just take a moment and fix the opposite end as well. I'll be right back. Okay, so this side looks pretty clean as well. And let's do the same process on the bottom edge as well, and I'll be back when I'm done with that. You know what, forget that. I'm not going to repeat the same process on the bottom end. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my insert edge loop tool, and I'm going to split at 50% and make sure that that split went all the way around. Looks clean. And then I'm going to switch to the front view, and I'm going to select the bottom half in faces, and I'm going to delete them. And then I'm going to select this half. I'm going to duplicate it. So invert the scale on the y-axis, -1. And then I'll just move it. Actually, before even doing that, let's take the center and make sure it's snapped to one of these points. So let's hit Insert, hold down V, and snap the center to one of those points. And now, when I do the duplication and the inversion of -1 on the y-axis, it's exactly where I need it to be. That's smarter. And you could even go through the process of combining these again. That will destroy the instances when I do that. But all I need to do is delete the history for that step, which is a pretty good time to do it. And then middle click, drag and drop it back into the original group 1, and it will repopulate the instances. And then I can delete these garbage objects that were created for the combination. So that went very, very well. Actually, I moved it into the wrong group 1. It should have been that one. Let me undo. Can I undo? Yes. Okay. It should have been not that group, but it should have been this group 1 here, this first one. Right there. Okay, great. So, and let's hide the surfaces because I don't think we need those anymore. So let's hide those. Control H. And there we have it. So bevels top and bottom. Boom. Done. That's wonderful. Oh yeah, and it looks like I forgot to deal with that. I think you know what I'm trying to say. So we'll just use the append to polygon tool to fill that hole. So we made a little mistake. Big deal. And when I'm done filling this in, I'll be right back. Great. So that is filled in, and now what I want to do is just check my polygon normal direction. And it looks great. So no problems with the normals. All right, so we're making great headway. We should work on the cylinders that run through the center shaft next. All right, so we want to work on the cylinders on the center shaft next, but I did notice there's a couple edges in the step that I didn't quite deal with yet, and you probably already saw them, and they would be the edges on the top side of this hole on the bottom side. Now, if we bevel this straight away, we will see a couple of problems due to, again, these contorted polygons I have right here. So let's run a bevel on that, and let's use our standard numbers of 0.25 and 2. And you see right away that it sort of pushes and distorts right in this, especially this corner right here, and we get a little bit of distortion around it. To help remove that, what I'm going to do is take this face loop and rotate it on the y-axis. So let's use gimbal, grab the y-axis and just spin it, and just take the pressure off of those edges right there. and I am rotating in gimbal space. So what you get now, and let's take a look at it with the bevel here. Hit Q and there, and then run the bevel again. You notice that it's just so much cleaner. So decent. Works out very, very well. And a little bit of a, turn off the wireframe here, a little bit of an edge to catch some light. And we can even set the normal angle for this entire step to be something higher, like 89 degrees, so that nearly polygons that are not quite at a 90-degree break will be rendered smooth. That's particularly nice on a real-time capture. So next we want to add in the cylinders for the center shaft, and I noticed that the mirroring process we did with the steps has actually caused a slight problem with my spacing. Let's take a look at what I mean here. So between each step, with each one being 0.5 units thick and a 2.5 riser between them, we get this overlap that has occurred because of the beveling. And let me prove that to you. So if I change the height of this, so the height of the cylinder is 2, that's good, we'll leave the default. And if I change it on the y-axis to, say, 1.5, so in between two of these, if we look at this from the front view, notice in wireframe that there is this slight overlap. And it happens to match exactly with where my bevel line is. So isn't that clever? So what I'm going to do is tag all of these vertices on the bottom side of the step and simply translate them up until they no longer intersect. Something to that effect. And I'll move the cylinder in closer to where my gizmo is so I can see what I'm doing. So all those points along the bottom, and just zoom in real close here and just nudge that right on top of it. There we go. So now when we go to perspective view and I put my cylinder back at the origin, it's spaced perfectly between the two. That works out well. So I could move it below -1 so that, again, referencing the image that we have earlier, there is a cylinder at the bottom. So we start with the cylinder and then the step. So this cylinder, I want it to be smoother because I'm not going to use subdivision surfaces. So let's use 24 sides. Let's also bevel the cylinder. So again, edge, top and bottom edges. Let's run the bevel on that. Let's make the bevel slightly smaller. So offset distance of maybe 0.1. Now let's do 0.05. And we can also, while we're here, right here at the beginning, let's apply a material to this cylinder. Assign new material. Let's give it a blend, and let's just make the blend color a lighter gray. Something like that. I guess you could give it like a tint of blue or something if you like, just to have some fun. Something aluminum-like. And then while we're here, let's give and doing materials, let's give the step a new material and also remove its history. So delete history, remove these garbage objects that were created for the combination a while ago. New material, let's give it a Phong material for the wood texture, and let's just give it a basic orange-ish tint, red-orange tint, cherry maybe. And that's fine. Something like that. And it doesn't populate to the rest of the instances due to due to the structure that I've created. We've talked about that earlier. So what we're going to do is select the master group that holds all the instances and apply an existing material to it, and that's going to be the Phong material. And then the post, while we're doing material still, let's apply that material to the post, assign existing blin, so that we're using the same material on that one. And let's also add a number of divisions around. For the polycylinder, let's make it also 24 so it's nice and smooth around, because again, we're not going to use subdivision surfaces on this one. You can ignore the fact that this step is below the ground, because when I'm done at the end, I'm going to take everything, group it, and then I can move it around the scene wherever I want to. So don't worry about that. Let's take this piece and instance it using the same strategy for a total of, let's try 13 to get started. And that seems to be exactly what we need right to the bottom step, right to the bottom of the top step. And let's take a look at the photograph to confirm. There's really hard to see exactly what's happening there at the top, but I think this is fine. Next up would be the posts for the handrail and the handrail itself. So let's get to work on that. So for the handrail height, we're going to make an educated visual guess. So we're just going to translate that up on the y-axis to approximately wherever I think that needs to be. So it looks like, just from a guess, from the bottom, or let's start with the second step. So from the first step, it goes up 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, 5 steps. So if we take a look at this from the front view, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 steps up, so we can snap to this grid point. Well, don't snap to the grid point, but just get it close to that grid point. I don't want it to go off to the side. So that seems to be a good height for this handrail. And because we're going to use instances on this piece as well, it'll be easy to adjust the height of the entire handrail. So let's name this so I don't lose track of it. Something like that. Oh, I'm sorry, not the handrail itself, handrail post. And let's just name this one and keep track of this one. Something like that. All right. Go to the top view and move this into place. And I understand I'm not snapping or being exact, but that should be fair right there. And I want to move it down on the y-axis 2 units. And so when I instance this one, and all I like to do is just drag and drop it into, I could either instance it again or drag and drop it into this piece. So if I instance it again, then that means I need to group this handrail separately and go through that process. But instead of doing that, I'm just going to middle click, drag and drop it into the first group. And it looks like I'm just off by half a unit there. So instead of a value of 1, let's try a value of 0.5 in the y-axis. And that should be, yeah. There are the handrails. And I'm going to need probably, I was going to say I need another one here, but this 13th step is the second floor, so I shouldn't, unless I was going to make these bits here. So I guess I could add a 14th in this scenario. That would probably be attractive. So instead of so I will go through the trouble of let's just undo this. There we go. So I will go through the trouble of doing the double grouping process. I'll group it twice, Control G twice. Again, because the The groups are at the origin, same place as everything else. And then I'll run the duplicate special on it, except I'll do it for a total of 14, so I'll say 13 of them. And that should give me, yep, exactly here. And then of course I need to edit the place on the y-axis, so 0.5 instead of 1, and they're all touching their step. Yeah, that's really going to be quite nice. So I've got a good clean start, and it'll have a good clean finish at the end, and then I'll even have the option to continue that railing here at the top. So that's attractive. Okay, so we want to make a curve for the handrail, and in this scenario, because I've only got 14 pieces, we're going to do it a very simple, straightforward way. I want to move the vertex, the center vertex of this cylinder up a bit so it's easy to snap to. I'm going to snap to the center of the cylinder, and I'm going to use the EP curve tool and snap to those locations at the top all the way up. And make sure I do in fact snap only to that point at the top, not to any other point. Not a very good way if you had 1,000 steps in your stairwell, but it works very nicely when you only have 14 handrail posts. Okay, so that's a decent shape right there. And now what I want to do is extend the curve at both ends, because I've got a little bit of curve to deal with at each end. A little bit of handrail sticking out at each end. So I'm going to use the Surface Edit Curves Extend Curve option box. I'm going to make sure it's set to both, and I'm just going to hit apply once. And so that's going to give me a couple of CVs at each end, so that the wood can stick out a little bit. Okay, so I said earlier that I would show you the differences between a circular and a rectangular profile and the challenges. So let's do the circular one because it's the easiest. So we'll get a curved circle, and I'll shift select the path, and I'll go to Surfaces and Extrude. We would then set the component pivot to use component pivot to set the component pivot, and then the profile set to on. And we would then go to the radius of the circle and change it to maybe something like 0.25 or 0.2. So that's really easy. You see, we've got a nice pipe running all the way up. So if your handrail is circular like this, you're done. Here's the downside to it, though, if you had a rectangular one. So if I select that isoparm right there, it's at the top. It's on the top of the handrail at the beginning. But by the time you get to the top of the stairwell, notice that that isoparm is twisting underneath. So there's actually this twist that's happening across the entire length. So that doesn't work out very well for me, especially if I think I've got some smart-ass plan to change the shape of the profile into something square-like. It's not going to help me because it's actually going to then show the twist even more so, more grossly. So what am I left with? Well, I'm not going to use this technique. Instead, what I'm going to do is duplicate the existing curve and translate it globally on the y-axis. So Control D, and translate that up on the y-axis. Let's move it up maybe 0.5, something like that. And that's in world space. So so now these two are parallel to each other on the y-axis, and I can loft between those two pieces. So I've got this thin ribbon going all the way up, and I want about 100. Not 100. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll do this on the conversion. So I've got this thin ribbon, and when I convert it, let's do that next. Convert, NURBS of polygons, option box. In here, I want to set the number of divisions. So the number of the U divisions for an extrusion, I want this to be 1, and the V, which is the length of the extrusion, I want 100 divisions. and apparently I had the wrong thing selected. Correction, I had it backwards. It is 100 divisions on U and 1 on V. It was different for me yesterday, so I guess it's just flip-flop it for whichever one works correctly. So, and then the number of sections on the original loft, I can set that to 1. So I've got this, so now I have this polygon object, which I can then extrude. So let's go to polygons, edit mesh, extrude. Let's thicken it, 0.5 on a local translate Z. And the only downside to this practice is that it's kind of like half of it's over here on half the post. So I need to like get it to go to the other side. And so what I was thinking is doing something like where I take the outside polygon again, and I'll select that first one, hold down Shift, double click this one, so it's the whole outer range, and then do the extrusion again on the other side, and then thicken it one more time, local translate Z, 0.5 again, so it pushes out the other way. So between two extrusions, I'm able to get it symmetrically lined up. And the best part is that this edge loop that's right here at the top, that one, if I select that first one and it comes to the top, Shift double click this one. If I translate that on the y-axis, globally on the y-axis straight up, notice that it's on top all the way up. I mean, isn't that's exactly what we wanted. That's just perfect. This setup works very, very well. Is ideal for your square handrails. I would recommend using something a little bit thinner than that. So instead of 0.5, maybe 0.25 for a total of 0.5 on each side. So 0.25 on each side, something like that. And then you could maybe just tweak it and adjust it or something. Maybe 0.3 would look better. Whatever seems to match the image better. I think 0.3 might look really nice. Yeah. And then in terms of matching to the posts, we're simply going to do some clipping. So I'm going to hide the original pieces and select the mesh, and on the y-axis globally, well, actually let's just leave it where it is globally on the y-axis. Let's just select all of the components. Let's just move the components. That would be easier, so it doesn't change the translation of the object in space. Something like that. So just a little bit of clipping at the bottom end. I suppose I could go through the trouble of actually drilling a hole to connect each post, but I do believe that's going to be a little bit overkill. Let's apply the material to it. Existing Phong is the wood material. Since this is slightly rounded on the top, we could insert some edge loops. Actually, better than inserting edge loops, let's bevel this top edge right here. So that edge, and then Shift double click the one at the top to get the whole range. And let's run a bevel on it. And let's increase the distance on the bevel, offset distance on the bevel, and also increase the segments on the bevel. So it has this rounded top with a square profile. That's pretty. We could run, lastly, we could run bevels across the bottom. There we go. And let's include these two corners here and here, both top and bottom. Here and here. And that should make a decent bevel on those corners. That's much better, much more attractive. Much more attractive. Okay. And then lastly, just as an added detail, a little bit of flair, I could translate this out a bit and have a slight bit of rounding there. Something for the light to catch. Okay. Looking decent. Okay, so next we want to make the wires along with the handrail, and we're going to use the existing handrail curve for these wires. So I'm going to select curve 1 in the outliner and duplicate it. And I'm going to move it down on the y-axis, just the y-axis. I'm also going to unhide it, Shift H. I want to bring in a circle. NURB circle, and I want to then shift select the path, surfaces, and extrusion option box. I want to use the at path option, component option, and profile normal option, so that when I hit apply, it will be created around that object. And I want to change the radius to 0.1 or maybe 0.05. 0.05 looks nice. And if we just hide the surface for a moment, I want to clip these first CVs, these first three, and I want to clip them, meaning delete them, delete them, and delete the last three. I also want to go through adjusting the position of each one of these CVs so that they don't clip on through the pipe. So I want the first one to connect and the last one to connect, but I want it to circle on the outside. So if we take a close look at the reference, you can see that these wires are indeed on the outside of the pipe. So we can make that adjustment after we do the conversion to polygons. So let's take the surface that we've created and convert that to polygons. And we'll use the general setting, and let's do 8 on the U-axis and V along the length. And let's hide the original surface, Control H. And then I'm going to go through manipulating each of these CVs. And let's just go to NURB CV. So select each CV, and I'm going to move them by control clicking on the Y-axis and just nudging them outside the post so that they're not crashing, clipping into the post. I'm going to do that all the way up, and I'll be right back when I'm done. Okay, so I've completed that. I've moved them all out just a little bit so they're not clipping into the post, and I confirmed it by making a duplicate of the original curve and lining it up in the side and front view to make sure it's nice and even. Next, what I'm going to do is instance the mesh so that if I have to make changes to one of them, it'll happen to all 5. And I'm going to use the script editor to do that. So down here at the bottom is the script editor button, or you could also get the script editor right here under the general editors. And if I move it over here, and if you make a new tab and make it a MEL script and type in the word instance with a semicolon, you can actually instance without having to use the duplicate special option, which is the only other way through the interface that I know where instance lives. Just highlight this text so that it doesn't disappear when we play it, and we'll instance this guy 5 times. So we'll hit play 4 times for a total of 5, and then we can go to the hypergraph hierarchy and confirm our instances. They should have highlighted in pink, but I'm near certain that these are actually instanced. So let's move forward with it. I'm near certain those are instanced, and we'll move this down to where we want to distribute to, the last one, and we'll select in order of distribution, and then we'll go to the modify, snap align the objects option box, and in here, if we reset this, this is the default. We want distance, and we want the distance on the y-axis between the selections that we've made, so when we hit apply, it evenly distributes between the first selection to the last selection. So now, if I make changes to the first object, if I go to, say, vertex, and select some vertices, we do indeed have an instance connection between all 5 of them, so a modification to one of them will happen to all of them, and that's what I want. So there's a nice, convenient way to do it. It's pretty simple. Lastly, we want to apply the material. So we'll apply the existing blend, and we'll do that to the instance as well. And we'll just have to select them all and apply the blend. I could just as easily take all 5 of these pieces and group it and then apply the material to the group. I could have done that. This is getting nearly done, and let's hide the old curves. So we're just looking at the polygon objects, and by this point what I'd really like to do is save the scene and group up my objects, do some naming, set up some simple hierarchies. I'm not going to waste your time with the renaming, and maybe get this whole thing up on the ground. So with everything here, let's just filter off everything except polygon surfaces. Select all of the polygon surfaces. No, that strategy is not going to work. We can't just select all. I was going to say group them, but that's not a good idea because I've already got groups managed right here. So better than that, let's select each of the mesh groups, and that would be, yeah, that would be these, and holding control when I get these, and those pieces. And then what's this one? That's the handrail, right? So now let's group. So all of those groups will be managed, and so now we've got this top level group for the entire handrail. Now we also still have connections to the original curves. By this point we probably want to run a deletion of history on everything to separate connections to the curves so that it's easier to translate. So if I try to translate this right now, some really odd things could happen, but I actually seem to be pretty lucky. Nothing bad is happening. Well, that's cool. We should delete the history anyway and save the scene. And let's also do some renaming on at least some simple things here. So like I know that this is the handrail mesh, and let's group that with the handrail wires, and let's put the posts into that as well. So that would be these 2 groups, and let's put the center shaft and shafts instances into a group, and let's put the step and step instances into a group. And I think that would be excellent. Fairly easy to manage by this point. Now I can take the entire group and translate it up 2 units, and everything should be resting on the ground. And then I can add a ground plane, maybe increase the width of it. We could hide the grid. We could throw on a material and maybe even a texture onto this floor. And then we could even use hardware texturing to display it. Maybe change the repeating of the textures. And then if you have if your card can support it, your video card can support it, you can use Viewport 2.0 to get some better visuals on this and start laying in some textures and bringing in the rest of the pieces. So I think this is a really good place to stop. This has been quite an arduous task for me, but it's a great pleasure to be able to get to this point, to have this kind of refinement. and to share it with you. So I think this is going to make you even better in the long run. So the next section is going to be more of the same instancing strategies, except on curves and organically. So we're going to be making plant life type objects, and we'll be using, primarily this will be based on the tool in Maya called the motion path, or for those of you coming from other programs, it would be like a path constraint. So we're going to get to that next.